Hi, Dr. Huntington here with another video in the series of 100 things you should know about type 2 diabetes. Now in this video, we're going to answer the question of why are so many more people obese today than 50 years ago. So up here on my board, I'm actually going to take you farther back than 50 years. We're actually going to look at all of human history. Now if you look at most of human history, obesity was extraordinarily rare. It wasn't until about 5,000 years ago that obesity started to show up. People started to gain more weight. So something happened around that time, and we'll get into that. And then it was in the last 50 years that the trend really started to take off. Yet, we are way more obsessed with calories today than ever. In fact, new FDA guidelines for food labeling is requiring that calories are listed on each label in huge print. So calories must be important, right? Everybody knows that in order to stay trim, you need to cut your calories, right? And of course, everybody knows that if you eat too many calories, you're likely to get fat. And so eating too many calories must be related to becoming diabetic, right? Well, beware of those everybody knows statements, because once everybody knows, most people stop inspecting or looking for a more accurate truth. By the way, all those everybody knows statements I just gave you are false. The truth is that obesity was rare throughout human history, and it's not because people were always starving. Even during times of abundant food, obesity was nowhere near as prevalent as it is today. The upward trend in obesity followed the modernization of civilization. So there is something about the changes in the way humans are living that is responsible for the rise in obesity. It was relatively well known even back in the late 1700s that refined carbohydrates were a primary factor in getting fat. That understanding continued up until around 1950, when all of a sudden the way to lose weight or stay trim changed from limit your refined carbohydrate intake, in other words, limit the amount of sugary or starchy foods that you eat, to this. In 1950, it changed to count your calories. And of course, people have been starving, yet getting fat on low-fat and low-calorie diets ever since. From about 1950 onward, the amount of sugary and starchy foods people eat have skyrocketed. And this had a lot to do with the low-fat fad that is still hanging on today. Because when you remove the fat from a food, you need to replace it with something, and that something is carbohydrates. So the low-fat diet craze meant an increase in dietary carbohydrates. And well, you can just look at old pictures taken from prior to 1950, and you can see what the high carbohydrate diet has given us. It's the prime cause of the obesity epidemic. And if you guess that it's also the prime cause of the rise in type 2 diabetes, then I would say you are correct as well. So, some things you can take from this interesting story. Number one, don't eat foods labeled low fat. Those foods are typically loaded with sugar, not to mention you need dietary fat. And number two, severely limit the amount of sugar and refined carbs you eat. You basically don't need them. Number three, the majority of your diet should consist of healthy fats, veggies, and a moderate amount of protein. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.